Hello, everyone. It's another Saturday Hamilton Education webinar. Since we're on Zoom, I'm going to take my mask off. I thought I'd begin with a poll, a simple poll of questions that seem useful given some of the things that we've been hearing from people in our in the questions that have been submitted. So let me see if I can do this. Everyone should, who's on this webinar, see two questions. Number one is, you've got a perfect score on your SAT, you're valedictorian at your school, you played 4 years of a sport and have practiced violin for 8 years, you're president of Key Club, your senior year. How likely are you to get into Harvard? We're gonna see what people think. The next question is, you're a first-year student at Yale. Congratulations, pretty exciting. You're enrolled in Introduction to Bio. How many people are in the class with you? All right, we'll let people take a minute to sort out their answers. Oh, this is so exciting. Let's see what we have here. Let's see if the voting slows down a little bit. All right, not everybody's voting, so I'll give it another 15 seconds to let people participate. Okay, we got 71% voting. It's considerably better than presidential elections. Good job, people. Okay, it looks like, Myla, some people are raising hands. I have a problem submitting. Okay, while we're talking, I'm gonna go over some of the answers to these questions. They're gonna come up in some questions that were submitted to us. Okay, you are Mr. or Miss Perfect. You've got all these great factors going on. How likely are you to get into Harvard? The correct answer is you're probably less than 5% likely to get into Harvard. There are about 1,650 students in the first year class at Harvard, and there are 36,000 valedictorians every year in the United States alone. There are only a few thousand kids in the world who are perfect on the SAT, but perfect and near perfect don't matter much. It would be probably below 5%, is definitely not 50 or 25 or 80 or 10. And you're a first-year student at Yale. You're in Introduction to Bio. I just confirmed this with some of my Yale students. The answer is about 500 to 600 students in a Yale first-year bio class. So let me see. I'll hit share results. I will, let me see. I want to hit, where do I'll exit the poll. I'm going to share my screen with everybody, and we'll start talking about what we're here today to discuss. Over the years, I've discovered there are 3 things that most people don't really know about American colleges, 3 things that I didn't know when I was in high school, and they are absolutely important things that you should know. Some of you, if you're parents, you may already know them. Some of you may not. So I welcome your insights, critiques in the form of questions or corrections at the end of our discussion today. Let me see here. There are basically three weird and, in a sense, wonderful things about American colleges. The first of them is that there are about 4,000 universities and colleges in the United States, and in other countries, it's very easy and simple to talk about what are the best colleges. From friends who've lived in China, I'm generally told that there are 4 universities that everyone reveres, and if you do well on the exam, the state exam, the Gaokao, you are probably going to go to one of these 4 schools. In Korea, there's a TV show called Sky Castle that is about the 3 colleges that everyone dreams of, and the national exam determines if you get in. In Japan or England, there are 2 universities that are preeminent. If you barge into Parliament and you ask everyone there to raise their hand if they went to Oxford or Cambridge, 80% of Parliament will raise its hand. There is a strong cultural consensus in the United States, around the world, about which colleges are the best, and you can count them on your fingers. This explains something that took me a long time to realize. I kept wondering why parents whose students were accepted to Ivy League schools were sometimes bitterly disappointed. And it has to do with the fact that around the world, if you grew up in some other country, there really are 3 or 4 universities that are the good ones. In the United States, we have 4,000 universities and colleges. And if we're very snobby, if we see a student who has awesome grades and scores and we say, you should only be going to the best American universities. Okay, let's chop off 3,900 that are not good enough for this excellent student. We're left with not 4 that are great, but maybe 104 where any dream you dream could come true. Another quirk about the American system is to figure out, okay, what are the good colleges? We have rankings like the one I'm sharing with you. Keep in mind, this ranking is made by a magazine company. There are other magazine companies like Forbes or the business publication, the Wall Street Journal. And when we pair them up, we see they're different opinions. This ranking says Princeton and Harvard and Chicago and Yale and Columbia are the best. On this ranking, Stanford is 5th. Some years it's 6th or even 7th. An MIT professor has cleverly and somewhat grumpily complained about the US News ranking, which is more or less the most influential. He points out if you cross off the best at the top and you put oldest and richest instead, it's basically the same list. The US News ranking values colleges that are very old and very rich. And that explains why Stanford is 5 on this list and has never been in the top 3 in the US News ranking. And Berkeley is 20. Stanford is very rich, but it's not old. And Berkeley is not old and not rich. It's public. It gets pushed lower down in the ranking. Here's something curious. I'm showing you the global rankings, the world rankings made by the same magazine, US News. You might notice what we call a paradox. I learned about Venn diagrams in the 3rd grade. What I'm seeing here doesn't make any sense given what I know about Venn diagrams. How can you be the 3rd best university in the whole world, but in the United States, you are 5th or 6th or 7th? How can Berkeley be the 20th best in the United States of America, but when we look at a global ranking, we look at a global ranking, Berkeley is 4th in the entire world. The global ranking disregards all factors that involve how old and rich they are. The global rankings are asking what patents, publications, Nobel Prizes, what companies are being created. And in that sense, from those criteria, Harvard and MIT and Stanford are the top 3 universities in the world, and Berkeley, a public university in California that many of you, your taxes support, is the 4th best university in the world, a little better than Oxford. And if we look at the list, a global ranking, we see that Yale is 12 and UCLA is 14 and UC San Diego is 19. It's the 19th best university in the world. More importantly, if we ask, what about engineering or technical majors, computer science? Then if we find Yale and Harvard, they're number 34 and 25 in the US News rankings. They're below San Diego and UCLA, and Berkeley is better than any Ivy League school. It's better than almost any university in the world when it comes to engineering and computer science. I would urge everyone to be very skeptical of these rankings, and at the very least, consider that they contradict one another in key ways, and they only make sense if we consider best from what perspective, best from what point of view. A viewer question that we had earlier is, if Mr. Hamilton has a child headed to college in a few years, what attributes would he be looking for in a school? That's a great question. My answer would be, it depends on the child that I would hypothetically have. If I had a student who was almost certain to be in engineering and computer science, I would look at that engineering list. If I had a student that seemed likely to want to become a medical doctor, I would look at an entirely different list, one that I haven't shown you yet, partly for this reason. When we ask what is a university, it's a meaningful question, and you might want to think for a moment about the little piece of Latin at the beginning of the word, university. It of course means one, like unicorn and unicycle, and it means on one campus, many colleges: medicine, law, dentistry, film, art, architecture, business, public policy, nursing, engineering. To many students, it seems like that could only be a good thing. A university has, like Costco, the quality of walking in one gate and you get anything you want. But in most American research universities, if you're an undergraduate, it's not like Costco. You are not going to get access to most of these resources. The resources of a university go up to postdocs, graduate degree seekers. They trickle down to the undergraduate population. I taught for 7 years at UCLA. I'm a huge fan of UCLA, but I have to admit, I taught a class once called Introduction to the Novel. It had 450 students in it. You teach it on a stage with a microphone attached to your shirt. You cannot answer questions on a stage from students in a class. It's not an intimate learning environment. Consider, if you're at Yale, world-class research university. You are going to be in a room of 600 people if you're taking Introduction to Biology. In a big research university, you may or may not get the resources that you need to take the next steps in your life. For instance, I wrote a lot of letters of rec for med school and law school, and I was happy to do it, but I tried to explain to undergraduates all those years ago when they would sit down in my office. I'm 29, at least back then. My title on the syllabus is instructor. My office doesn't have a window. It's in the basement of Royce Hall. I would ask them, surely, since you have a 3.85 in biochem and you want to go to med school, Wouldn't a professor in biochem who has a window in their office be a little more qualified, a little more influential in writing a letter? And what I got was, I've never spoken to a biochem professor at UCLA in my major. They don't want to talk to me. I won a teaching award one year at UCLA for like a day. I was proud. I had the highest evaluations in the English department that quarter, and the department chair gave me a handshake and a plaque and a good job. My dissertation advisor asked to see me later in the week. I naively thought I would get a pat on the back. She asked me questions like, I heard you have office hours on top of your regular office hours. And in these office hours, she looked quizzical. You help students revise their papers. She asked me, is that a good use of your time? She meant, it's not a good use of my time. She meant, work on your own damn papers. Don't help undergrads. At a research university, the point is to create intellectual property, to do research. Professors, if they're famous, may do no teaching. They may entirely work on research and grants. There's a type of college or university that we call liberal arts. And this is very confusing because they're not liberal and they don't teach art. In fact, at a liberal arts college, there are more STEM majors typically than humanities majors. If I had a student who wanted to go to grad school, who knew he or she needed to go to law school or med school to help their dreams come true, I would point out that at a liberal arts college, the professors, all of whom have PhDs from very prestigious universities, they'll have a ratio of about 8 students to 1 professor. At a liberal arts college, an organic chemistry class might have 20 people. At a small Ivy League, an organic chemistry class might have 30 people. At a liberal arts college like some at the top of this list, like Amherst or Pomona, the acceptance rates to med school for kids with good grades, they're about 95%. At Berkeley and UCLA, the acceptance rates into med school, if we look at students with good grades and did they get into any med program, the rate is about 51%. It's a very, very big difference. We could go to the bottom of this very snobby top tier list, number 47, 48, and still have about a 90% acceptance rate into med school. It turns out when your professors know your name, when they may even have you to dinner, or you dog sit for them over a holiday, it's a different relationship. And so one of the secrets of American universities and colleges is that smaller colleges are not like small towns or like a small apartment characterized by a lack of room or opportunity. A small university, in my experience, is like a small jet. It's like a private jet. I've only flown on a private jet a couple times. I gotta tell you, I kind of liked it. I could get used to it. UCLA is not a private jet experience if you're an undergraduate. It would be like boarding Group 9 on American or United. This is more what I'm used to. Second weird thing, and it's really, really weird if your parents grew up in another country, is open versus impacted majors. This is vitally important for many students. In other countries, perfectly reasonable, rational educational system. You decide what you're going to do when you're 14. You take a horrifying test that could last 2 or 3 days when you're about 16, and it decides, are you smart enough to do that thing? And then at 17, they teach you in university how to do that thing. Doctor, dentist, lawyer, engineer, business administrator. That's how it works in almost every developed industrialized country, except the United States. In the US, 90% of the students who are going to top tier universities are in what we call open majors. That means if you apply to Yale or UCLA and you want to study physics or math or biology or psychology, and you click any of those majors, they're open majors. It wasn't harder to get into Yale because you picked a science versus a humanities major. The same is true for UCLA. And when you get to these campuses, in your first and even in your second year, you are open to try out different majors. There's an exploration that's understood to be a good thing. You can switch pretty easily, filling out a form. There's a cost, as it were, for the freedom that this system entails. If you graduate summa cum laude from Yale, and you're an econ major or a bio major, I'll tell you some jobs you're not qualified for. You're not an economist, you're not a biologist. You would have to go to graduate school and get a PhD. You'd have to do independent research. The American system doesn't train most of our undergrads in open majors for a specific type of employment. And so we have a system where a good friend of mine is a medical doctor. His major was philosophy. My freshman roommate got a job at Goldman Sachs, became a partner at Goldman Sachs, and now runs some kind of private equity venture. He makes like $1 gajillion. His major was physics. That is a uniquely American experience, except for the 10% of students that fall into the impacted majors. And impacted majors are most strikingly engineering, nursing, and computer science. These are majors where when you click those majors as your intended major, it gets harder to get in. When you see that San Diego and UCLA are ranked above Harvard and Yale, you shouldn't be surprised that it's about as hard as an Ivy League to get into those majors. Impacted majors are looking for a skill set and an interest that is particular to that major, because when you come on campus, you're not exploring to the same extent. You are studying to be a nurse, to be a computer science employee, to be an engineer, and they need to look at scores and activities to see if you're a good fit for this major. The upside, and it's a pretty big upside of an impacted major, is when you walk through graduation, you are 95% likely to have a job in your pocket, to have a job that is a high-paying job. A mom on a Skype call with Northern California explained it very succinctly about a year ago. She told her daughter, "You want to be a doctor? That's marvelous. We support any of your dreams, but your dream will mean 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 4 to 6 years of residency, where you're like an indentured servant for a hospital, and then you'll be living your doctor life." She said, "Your brother is computer science at UCLA. He's going to graduate in a couple months. He already has a job at Hulu waiting for him with a starting salary of $160,000. Impacted majors are harder to get into. They are training you for a certain type of profession or employment, and they are very strong when it comes to return on investment. Very strong return on investment. If you see college as only return on investment, then maybe everybody should be an engineering or a nursing or a computer science major. But I'd beg you to consider, not everybody likes math. Not everybody likes blood or humans. Not everybody likes coding. You're probably not going to be successful at something you don't like. And the American system is very interested in that period of exploration, which leads to the final weird, very important thing that's different about our system. There's no GPA or score. Even perfect grades and scores do not make you likely to get into the most selective American universities. The good in our system is you're going to be evaluated in 3 dimensions. They want to know, did you have a difficult life? Are you creative? Is there a spark of leadership? They want to know a lot of things beyond scores and grades. I'm convinced scores and grades can't tell us the most important thing about a human being's potential. The bad of our system is asking teenagers to market themselves to American institutions. Teenagers are not products. It's awkward to market. It's awkward to market yourself. It would be so much better if we had a blood test or an MRI that we could administer, and we could know that you're going to be creating and building and making and leading in the future. The only technology we have that can come even close to telling us answers to these questions about who you'll be, your inner self. The technology is very old, and we call it narrative. You're going to use narrative. You're going to tell a story. I have to say, although some students will struggle, most will not, in my office, struggle unnecessarily to get good scores and grades. We're very good at it because we do things very differently in terms of test prep. 40,000 students last year who were juniors in San Diego took the PSAT. 212 were national merit semifinalists. 112 of the 212 were our students. There are some states that get 17 perfect scores in a year. 2 years ago, Nebraska had 17. The governor had a big party to celebrate the students. The boys wore tuxedos. In our office that same year, we had 43 kids. Some kids don't even tell us they got a perfect score. The hard part is generally not the scores. The tricky part is distinguishing yourself from all the other people who have great scores and grades. And that is work that is done one-on-one, in fact, almost three-on-one. It takes several people in our office worrying and thinking about a student to help market them, to help tell that story. And in the time of COVID, where grades and scores might be a little less meaningful, I promise you the story and the narrative will be more meaningful. Here's a question to change the pace a little. What do parents and students underestimate most about getting into a great university? Well, this is apropos. I would say based on the poll we took and based on my experience, they underestimate most how difficult it is to get in to a good school. They don't understand that on this snobby list, it's probably less than 5% for the very top schools, even if you are perfect. They don't understand that someone this year who's extraordinary as a human and extraordinary as a scholar, she got into Harvard, she got into Princeton, she got into Stanford. She was rejected by Pomona and Claremont McKenna. That's not a freakish thing. That is what we would expect when the numbers are what they are. Someone this year who's an extraordinary young man got into Harvard and Yale and Berkeley EECS, which is about as hard to get into as Harvard and Yale. He got rejected by UCLA. That's what parents underestimate. I would say another thing that they underestimate is how important the story is. You're not answering college's questions. All questions on a college application are basically the same. And the questions are you amazing? Are you going to create and build and make and lead? American universities and colleges are different. I'm not going to claim they're better. I'm going to insist that they're different, but I'm less confident that they're better. But they're different in that they're creating a different type of citizen or subject. With our best students, the majority are not trained for a certain type of employment in undergraduate because we're not making employees ultimately out of them. We're making entrepreneurs and employers. I will admit, if we look at this snobby list and we go down another 100 or 200, you still have universities and colleges where all your dreams are very likely to come true. There are hundreds of colleges that are great. But I would want people to know, as you go down further, you'll start to see fewer of these open majors and more majors that look like golf course maintenance or golf course design. They're not for losers and dummies. I don't want to be snobby about it at all. But up in this range, the idea is that your major will teach you to think and solve problems, and graduate school will probably teach you your profession, or your professional colleagues who are older will teach you your profession, or both. In law school, they teach you the law, but they don't teach you how to be a lawyer. That will happen the first 5 or 6 years working in a practice. My dad was an orthodontist. He went through 10 years of college, and my mom tells me on the way home from his final graduation for orthodontic specialty school, he turned to her and said, "When are they going to teach us how to do it?" That's part of how our system works. In England, when they make doctors, they do it differently. And some people think, well, that's a better system. They start at 17, they give O levels, A levels to determine if you're smart, and they start turning you into a doctor at 17. But remember, they're turning students into an employee of the British National Health, which is not a criticism. Everyone has healthcare in England. That's a pretty big plus. But they're not creating doctors who are entrepreneurs, who will start private medical practices. They're creating doctors who are employees of the government, and they are not creating doctors who are as statistically likely as American doctors to create medical devices and medical device companies. In China, we have to admit, they must make great engineers. They've got bullet trains, and we have Amtrak. On YouTube, I saw a hospital constructed in 10 days. That was pretty impressive. But we'd have to admit that in most countries, they want their students who are going to be engineers or scientists or doctors to be very smart, and they want them to be good boys and good girls who do what they're told. This is France, 1968, student revolutions. This is Kent State in the United States, 1970. This is China in 1989. Many countries will confirm it's good to have students who are smart. If they're all going to be leaders, they might lead, and that could be awkward, even dangerous. The American system is based on the insight that we want students who are not all down the line, students who did everything they were told to do, but students who did things that no one told them to do. And the real challenging work in the office, the work that we do nationally in other cities and internationally in other countries, is help students who have, often with a little help from us, achieved great scores and grades, help them tell a story, help them market themselves to the most selective colleges in the United States. There's got to be a spark. And so when I meet with students, whether it's in the last 2 months on Zoom or face-to-face, which I desperately miss, I want to know, are you sleeping? Are you, do you have time to do interesting things? Your interests make you interesting. I want to find out about those interests, and I might even nudge, pull, push a little bit to turn those interests into something that will be interesting to colleges. The third weird and wonderful thing about the American system is that we want to know about your inner life, your inner self, and who you might become. You should never lose a healthy sense of skepticism about whether an institution can actually know your future or your inner self. I would argue it's difficult for them to see that. One reason is Ivy League freshman cohorts will be made up of more than half boarding schools, legacies, donors, athletes, students that add certain diversity elements. More than half of the spots are taken. I mean, my advice, only half joking, if you really want to go to Stanford or Harvard, is pick your parents very wisely. I work with the other half who generally don't have those advantages. And the first thing to do is to make sure there's enough space in their lives to have interests so that they are interesting. My students who do the best, they tend to be nice. They tend to be smiley. They tend to be good people. These three things are vitally important to understand that there are many more colleges that are great than just 3 or 4. There could be 104 easily. One of my students who was not even going to apply to Dartmouth, literally someone in his family said, "What the heck is Dartmouth?" That student ended up going to Harvard Med School, and almost every dream that he dreamed, he told me, came true. He thought it was funny. It came true by going to a school that wasn't even on his list. One of my students who went to Bowdoin, family was a little puzzled why I would name this college they'd never heard of. He is at Stanford Medical School. Bowdoin is an extraordinary liberal arts college, and will give you a better chance of getting into a top med school than even schools that I love, like the UCs. I'm going to answer some questions and see where that takes us here to get through our last couple of minutes. Can you get a full scholarship, someone asked, to any American colleges based on your good academic GPA, SAT scores, and AP scores? The answer is absolutely yes. Someone this year got about $250,000 from one top 20 college based on all of these factors. USC will cut your tuition in half automatically if you're a national merit semifinalist, and they'll put you in the running for other scholarships that could be 100%. And more valuable than the money is the fact that these scholarships have a name: trustee, presidential scholar, and they follow you on your curriculum vitae throughout your whole academic life. It means easier to get into med school, easier to get into law school. The UCs have regents and chancellor scholarships, which turn boarding group 9, UCLA, into more like business class, where you get priority registration. A large component of winning those scholarships is grades and scores. It's related to number 12, the 12th question that came in. There was news about the UCs that they're going to cancel SAT, ACT submissions. No, the news is pretty sloppy in reporting that. It is true that the SAT and ACT, because of the COVID crisis, are optional. It's not true that they're not wanting them or not submitting them. In fact, it's very likely that if you're middle class, there might be 10 or 20,000 more applicants to UCLA or Berkeley. They are going to need scores because more than 53,000 students a couple of years ago had above a 4.0 applying to UCLA, and this is to create a class of 6,000 first-year students. I want to read a couple questions in the final moments we have, some that struck me as interesting. Do students have to retake AP classes they took this year in college since they only earned credits without grades? I'm not sure I understand the entirety of the question. I will say it's unclear what schools like the UCs will do with APs giving credit. They are likely going to give credit even though the APs were abbreviated and are testing less. And an Ivy League school or private school generally doesn't give AP credit. They give you credit for taking the hardest classes in admission. It matters a lot, but they're not going to give you credit because you don't show up at Caltech and MIT saying, look, I already know all about calculus. Their opinion is you don't, and they're probably right, unless maybe Mr. Shea taught you. I don't know. How does one weigh the importance of internships versus sports in overall time management plan? That's a great question. I would say if the sports could lead to recruitment, if it's likely to lead to recruitment, it's like a magic bullet. It is a magic key. But if it's not going to lead to recruitment, it could be something that took 20, 25 hours a week. And in the end, it doesn't really tell a story. Internships are very good for impacted majors because they help answer, are you a good fit for computer science or engineering? But keep in mind, for the highest level colleges, even an internship at Salk or Scripps, while it's great for bragging about at cocktail parties, my kid got an internship at Salk, the colleges you probably want to go to want to know, okay, and then what did you do? What did you create? What did you build? What did you make? So I would say, unless you're an athlete who's going to be recruitable, you want to be careful about how much time you're putting in this. But if it could lead to recruitment, it's a very good investment. And internships, very, very helpful, but on their own, the fancy name of the institute probably won't open the doors wide to the schools you want to go to, although it adds another layer. Someone asks in another question, how helpful or beneficial is it for a student to consult or contact the admissions rep assigned to their region? Excellent question. It entirely depends upon your student and how socially savvy your student is. If your student is going to make a great impression, it could be helpful to show that you're reaching out and interested. You should keep in mind, Stanford and Harvard probably don't care at all unless you're a recruited athlete. A smaller school, it can be very, very helpful to reach out. But again, I know of someone who, based on a story another student told me, went to a liberal arts college presentation and told them that her first choice was Princeton. If your student is going to do that, keep them away from the college rep. That is not helpful. Another question, how important is it to talk about your experiences during the pandemic for college apps? Won't almost everyone write about it? Yeah. I would say it's important to be doing something positive, to create and build and make some solution to a problem in the midst of this. It doesn't have to be a medical solution or a medical problem. It could be an educational solution, an educational problem. And speaking of those things, how will summer SAT prep at Hamilton be held in regards to the pandemic situation? And the simple answer is, although we will have in-person classes if it's safe and if it's allowed, we're assuming we're going to be offering online options. And I'm very excited about those options. One of them is, of course, what we've done for years, online one-on-one tutoring, which is traditionally good for kids with learning disabilities, good for kids who live in other countries and other cities, and good for kids who want the luxury of one-on-one time and attention. It is a luxury product. So what we're doing, I don't think anyone else in the world is doing this. What we're doing this summer is building our ordinary classes for online versions into seminars, making them smaller, 12 kids around an online table, seminar style, 10 to 15 students, maybe smaller, in fact. And we are simply giving away tutoring to all students. I decided several weeks ago to make sure that that students get what they need and that we get results. I'm going to take a luxury product, one-on-one tutoring that would typically be $2,000 and simply add it to everyone's classes. Like many businesses, we're not going to make a profit this year. We want to make sure that we're around and stronger than we were when this began. And we want to make sure that our students, who are mostly middle class, are also stronger and in a stronger position to apply to selective colleges. I hope none of my students have tragedies to share in their college apps, but I know other students around the country will. So our students will have to show what they're doing to create solutions and options, and they will have to be probably a little better this year, if anything. We're hoping to be even a little better this year by simply giving people more of everything, more time, more attention. I'm very happy to answer questions online. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. These are maybe not secrets, or if they're secrets, they're open secrets, but they're three important things that everyone should think about when thinking about your path for American universities. Thank you.